So this demonstration is going to be on how to hang this type of paper. This type of paper is called what?
Blown vinyl.
Blown vinyl, which is made out of what? You remember from last lesson? What's it made out of?
Putty.
No. Paper. And what is the actual embossment? What is that made out of?
Is it the thing that's put on hot?
It is put on hot. It's like a plastic called PVC. Yeah, it's just a plastic. Okay, it's just plastic on the top. And as we know, it can damage if it's scratched. Okay. So these sometimes come already coloured. So the actual PVC on the top is actually coloured instead, and the backend's white, which means you can put it straight on and you don't have to paint it. Okay, but this is a paintable paper. This one here has got quite an sort of an elaborate pattern. The reason it's got an elaborate pattern, the reason we're using it, is because we're going to do what's called glazing and wiping on here. So each of you today are all going to hang blown vinyl to your panel, okay? Should only take an hour or so, but I just want to go through the processes, all right? So, and each of you will make sure that the header is in the same place. Do you know what the header is? Yeah, it's the top, so it's the pattern at the top. So if you look at this paper here, you will see that it's got a top. Now that doesn't deviate all the way along, that is the same all the way along. So each of you are going to put your paper on with the same header. And now to choose a header, what you do is you would undo your paper and look at a piece that you think is more prominent and draws your eye to it. What would you say, Jalen? Which is the most prominent part of that pattern? Which bit sticks out to you?
Wouldn't that be like the big bit where your hand is?
That one?
Yeah.
So like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's called the header. Now if you look at that, you will see that it's surrounded by this. So if we start at the top there, we've got all of that, aren't we? And this is a straight match, so we're not going to be cutting through a pattern. So when you pick a header, you pick something that's going to look good at the top without cutting through it. So if you example, if you've got a bird, you're not going to cut its head off. You're going to make sure you see the whole bird from the top. And you do that with any pattern paper. You look at the best header. So that would be a header. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to measure the wall, and I'm going to show you how to measure and cut the paper, because the paper's cut different at the top than when you use it on the wall normally. All right. So the first thing I'm doing, I'm going to measure the wall. What happened to my pencil? Did you have it, Jess? Someone took it, didn't they? Someone borrowed it. Oh, is it there? Thanks, Jack. Cheers. So Dan, I'm going to use your panel, okay? So it's 900, but I'm going to cut it to fit up here. So I don't need to add 100 waste on, I'm just going to add 50, okay? So I'm going to do that at 950. So if I double check, I'm going there. 950 will take me to there, which is enough for me to trim off, isn't it? Usually when you line, before you put a finished paper on, like you're on a cubicle, always paper would work. But if you're putting a blown vinyl on, what's going to be painted, your woodwork is painted last. Alright? So I need to go from my header, now that's the bit I picked that I thought was the best bit, and measure 900 down. No one corrected me there. Not one of you corrected me. You woke up yet? Any of you? You're still in the Easter mode. So let's see if I'm about there. Okay. So the bottom bit you can cut with shears. But the top bit, I'm going to cut dead straight so it fits straight away. Okay. And to do that, I'm going to use a zinc strip straight edge and a knife. So, would the camera person come up here, please? Thank you. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to double check I don't cut too low. So I'm going to cut in about, maybe about round there. Okay. So what I do is I'm going to measure up 950. Okay. Put a mark, and I'm going to measure up 950 from here. Now I don't know whether that's dead straight because I don't know if I've cut straight. So I'm going to put my zinc strip under where I think it's going to be. And then I'm going to get my straight edge and I'm going to find a tip of something, some part of that pattern on both sides for me to line up my straight edge. Does that make sense? Yeah? So here I've got a bit of a leaf, top of a leaf, got a top of a leaf there. So can you see that? So I've got a top of a leaf there, I've got a top of a leaf there. Okay? So using the zinc strip underneath and pressing down firmly on the straight edge, what you need to do is cut that straight piece. Okay? So that is my header now. That is what is going at the top. Okay? I'm cutting it on the board rather than cutting it on the top of the wall. Yeah? The bottom I'm going to trim to the skirting, but this I'm going to do straight. When you've got a dado rail or like a straight snapped line, this is how you get it absolutely bang on straight. Okay? So I will need, how many for that piece panel do you think? Two. Okay? And if you remember, it's a straight match. So I'm just going to copy this again, but I'm still going to trim the top. So that's a bit too short. Not enough for me to cut. So I'm going to take it up. And then again, I'm going to put the strip under here, on top of the other piece of paper, because you don't want to cut through the other piece of paper. I'm going to line it up with them two bits of leaf that I used the first time. Use pencil as well, use pencil marks if you're unsure. Keep checking. And then using the zinc strip underneath so we don't damage the table or the paper underneath, we're going to cut through with your paper hanging knife. Always use that tip. Okay. Now I've got two pieces there exactly the same. So I know with this second one, all I've got to do, don't have to cut it exact because I've got some wastage to play with. Cut it with a 50mm excess. Yeah, so I've got my two pieces now. Now from now on, it's going to be kind of plain sailing. So all I need to do is create a plumb line to hang my first piece to, which I'm going to show you now, and then basically hang it to the line and to the top. Okay, so if you just want to stop that video. So the second part of this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a plumb line for you to hang your paper to. Okay. Now we've measured the paper wet and it's expanded to 530. And that's from 525 when it was dry. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to put a mark at the top at 530. I'm going to put a mark at the bottom at 530. and I'm then going to drop my plumb line. If you're doing your long vertical walls, you want to mark top, bottom and middle, okay, because your wall might bow a little bit. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to offer the plumb line down and I'm going to see if this architrave is straight. Okay, my plumb line's going to be straight wherever I put it. But if I'm measuring from an architrave and just papering next to an architrave, if that architrave is a few millimetre out, then my pattern's going to start going down. Yeah? So. That looks pretty bob on, really. So the architrave must be straight. If you're coming away from a corner, quite often corners aren't plastered dead on, okay? But you need to get your paper dead straight for it to look good. You don't want a pattern, you don't want to hang the first piece like that and the pattern just run down, all right? You need to keep your pattern horizontal. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to look straight at the plumb line now. Stop it swinging, which is not always easy. And then I'm going to mark directly behind the string, looking dead onto the string. So these are the marks that I'm then going to hang my paper to. There. Okay, and that's where I'm going to hang my first piece of paper to, because I know that is dead straight. Okay? So, oh, dead on. So, what you need to hang it then is your knife. Would you do me a favour? Would you get me a board off the back, please, Jasmine? One of them plastic boards, the colourful. It's just so I cut to it. You see how soaked this has become. So from a white piece of wallpaper and only the actual embossment has stayed white, so the background's all soaked in. Okay. So what you're going to do here is that top is dead straight. Okay. So I'm going to hang this to my plumb line. Just move that up so it's dead straight. So I don't need to trim the top. Yeah. Okay. Maybe. Wicked behind the box. Okay. So here, obviously, I don't need to trim the top, as I say. I've brushed down the centre, brush out to the sides. And that fits perfectly because we've added that extra. If we hadn't added that extra 5mm on for expansion, that would have gone round the corner, we'd have to trim it off. Yeah? So then opening the bottom. Just making sure it's on the plumb line. Give it a really good smooth. So no trimming on the top. Make sure that you trim on the bottom. Okay, so remember, these knives are quite good. These are really thin blades, okay, so the smaller blades are a lot thinner, but just be careful because they are sharp. Make sure you retract them after you've used them before you put them in the pocket. Okay, so cutting on the outside of the board with your knife, not with a tip, with a knife laid flat, just move the board across. Like this. If it drags a bit, don't worry. Like that has, because you can always cut the bit that's dragged. Okay, and then always fold up. Yeah. What next before you swab your brush?
Wash, wash.
Wash, wash.
Show water. Water in it.
And I'll use that. Use my smoothing brush. And that, as you can see, that is my header, isn't it? Yeah? Okay. So, we stop there. So then with this gap, what we're going to do is we're going to measure it top and bottom. This is architrave might have gone out. So we're going to check how much is left exactly. So we've got 320. 320. Perfect. So what we're going to do now is we're going to cut this piece exact. We're not going to mess about with loads left over. We're going to cut it exact. So making sure the paper aligns perfectly along the edges, so they fold up and they totally go on top of each other, and then right up to the board edge. What we're then going to do, let me just check that measurement, don't want to get it wrong, 320. What I'm going to do is, I don't mind you marking these rulers with a bit of pencil, so I've just marked my ruler there at 320. Then I'm going to clamp it. Has anybody not seen this before? Stand up if you want to see it better. Okay. So I'm going to clamp the actual ruler in my hand, and I'm going to have the line against the edge. What I'm then going to do is I'm just going to put the pencil, little finger there, pencil rested on top. All right. But I'm not going to look at the pencil mark. I'm not going to look at my fingers here. I'm only going to look at that line. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure that I'm keeping the ruler straight against the edge of the paper, like that. Now I can do one or two things here. I can cut it with shears, or I can do it super quick by using the straight edge and the zinc strip. The only trouble is, when it starts to get too wet, it does start to drag, okay, because it's a pulp paper. And generally with pulp papers, we don't always cut them with knife because they drag too much, like your lining papers. Okay, so that's easy peasy. This bit then, just give it a little bit more. This then should fit straight into here perfectly. So we need to match and we need to butt. So we're looking at the match, we're getting the match spot on and we're getting it butted up. Okay. What would happen if this piece overstretched to that piece?
We'd overlap onto the next.
Could overlap. Anything else? The pattern would stretch as well. So you'd end up with it matching at the top but not matching at the bottom because this piece is overstretched. If you do get to that point where you think this is overstretched, the best place to match it is at eye line. So wherever you stand in the cubicle and look at, if it goes out a little bit at the top, a little bit at the bottom, that's not as noticeable as it going out in the middle, where your eye is drawn to it. Okay. So once it's on, fits perfectly, and we only have the bottom to trim, so making sure it's got a lot of slip and slide. So if you think it needs to go up, just slide it. Pass us that knife, please, Rita. Thank you very much. And then trim the bottom, and then do what? Trim the bottom. You can use pencil and shears if you don't want to trim it, because the softer it gets, the more pulpy it gets. Obviously, I was all going to say sponge, weren't you? The pulpier it gets, the harder it is to cut straight. So if you prefer to do it with shears, that's fine. doesn't matter. So that then is your panel ready blown vinyled, ready to receive 2 coats of eggshell. Then once the eggshell's dry, 1 coat of glaze, and then I'll do a demo on glaze and wipe. Is that alright? Well, thank you.